What is up, everybody? This is your boy, Teran Rodriguez, bringing you another edition of Set Point. And as always, we have ourselves a jam-packed show, such as plenty of upsets of what happened in last week's NCAA volleyball action, such as Florida, number 7 Florida upsetting number 3 Kentucky. The Wildcats finally met their match in the regular season. But did they lose the second match? And we had some Pac-12 upsets as well, such as Colorado, the Buffs, taking down Utah in the Rumble in the Rockies, and USC pulling off a 5-set thriller over UCLA. Guess the Lady Trojans had it in them after all. And then we had some noteworthy wins, such as Kansas City of Missouri taking down South Dakota not once, but twice. And they are one win away from winning the Summit League regular season conference title. Also, we had Long Beach State's men's volleyball team doing battle against UC Santa Barbara. Were they victorious in at least one of their matches, or did they go 0-2? Also, we have previews of some of the noteworthy NCAA volleyball matches this week. All that and more here on Set Point. This is Teran Rodriguez bringing you another edition of Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. And welcome one, welcome all to another edition of Set Point. Thank you for joining me on this beautiful Tuesday afternoon, March 23rd, 2021. Glad to be here talking with y'all about some volleyball action. And it is great to see everyone here and hear everyone tuning in. And without any further delay, let us get into some volleyball action. But first, let's get a little quick word from our sponsors. The first sponsor for IE Sports Radio is Legacy Financial. 2020 was a tough year. However, staying positive, keeping your faith, and continuing to work hard is the goal. If you're ever in a financial struggle at the moment, you're doing well and you want to get to the next level, or you're looking for a new opportunity to work for yourself and earn more money part-time, give AO a call at 510-928-2104 to book your appointment today. AO and her husband Andrew are just two people on a mission to help families build a legacy, because everyone in their life needs a legacy. You can follow them on Twitter at legacy_uncut and on Instagram at sims_uncut. The second sponsor from IE Sports Radio is Mama's Always Right Media. Are you feeling overwhelmed with schoolwork? Are those essays keeping you up at night? Don't lose sleep. Just pick up the phone. Mama's Always Right Writing Agency will give you quality essays, and they will always meet their deadline. Sleep soundly knowing that they are on the job. For more information, call 626-653-3649. That number again is 626-653-3649. And while you're at it, definitely check out Mama's Always Right Media's podcasts, such as It Goes Down in the PM. Make sure to check out the newest episode of It Goes Down in the PM, brought to you by Mama's Always Right Media. And their second podcast from Mama's Always Right Media is Coffee After Dark. Don't miss the next chapter of your favorite love story. Check out Season 2 of Coffee After Dark, brought to you by Mama's Always Right Media, where they will help you open up your business from start to finish. And as a little bit of a quick note for It Goes Down in the PM, their newest episode will be the host getting the tea on the Twitterverse and Gamer Girls. So definitely do check out the newest episode of It Goes Down in the PM, brought to you by Anchor, or brought on Anchor. And then the last sponsor for IE Sports Radio is the Sports Rundown. Are you a sports fan but have too much going on in your life these days to keep up with the 24/7 sports news cycle? Or maybe you are new to sports and want to understand the nuances better. If so, then the Sports Rundown is for you. They are a new podcast that gives you basic, professional, and collegiate sports news, stats, tidbits, and fun facts by the time you get to work, start that second cup of coffee, or finish walking the dog. Enough information to make you rich with knowledge involving sports while talking about current sporting events. And they will teach you something fun along the way, like about mascots, uniforms, history, feel-good stories, and sports rules. And for all you soccer studs out there, they even cover the Premier League. New episodes drop Monday and Friday mornings, so come give them a listen. So thank you to all three of our sponsors for being the official sponsor of IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that. Alright, so those are those sponsors out of the way. So without any further delay, let's get on into some volleyball action. So let's recap all of the first matchups, or all of last week's matchups, considering we had plenty of matchups. And we're going to try to format this differently. So I'm not going to try to spend too much time on what's been going on here, but it would be but I do need to break down some of these matchups. So the first matchup that was noteworthy from last week in terms of an upset was number 3 Kentucky versus number 7 Florida. So going into this match, Kentucky had not lost a match, and they were pretty much undefeated. They were 16-0 going into that game, and it looked as if that they were going to win that match. And here's the thing about Kentucky. If they pretty much won the series between Florida outright, then they would have won the SEC as a whole, and they would have made it to the NCAA tournament. But if they were to lose both matches in the series to Florida, then Florida would be on point to making the NCAA tournament and getting the automatic qualifiers. So the first match between Kentucky and Florida did not disappoint, as Kentucky started out guns a-blazing and took the first set 25-18. The Wildcats didn't really have too much trouble in that first set. They really set the tone despite them being on the road. The second set, it looked as if Kentucky was going to win that set. However, it was a lot closer than expected. And it was so close that Florida was actually in it for the most part, as Florida actually took the second set 27-25. I think Kentucky had a few chances to pull away and win the set, but unfortunately the Gators, being as resilient as they are, just did not quit. Then the third set, Kentucky basically went back to the drawing board and did what they did in set 1 and won the third set 25-17. And then set 4, Florida actually showed up and they blew out Kentucky in the fourth set, winning 25-16, forcing a fifth set. And in set 5, Florida was up 13-10, and they eventually were up 14-12, and I'm thinking, oh gosh, Florida's actually going to win this. Except not really, because Kentucky actually scored the next 2 points to tie the game, or tie the set at 14 apiece, and it was a whole new ball game between the Wildcats and the Gators. But at the end of the day, Florida was able to pull off the upset and complete the 5-set win over Kentucky, beating the Wildcats in set 5, 17-15. So that's how Florida upset number 3 Kentucky. And that's pretty darn impressive, because honestly, I chose Florida to win both of these games. I picked Florida to win both games, or both matches, so I admit I will eat my crow. But honestly, I gotta give it up to Florida. They really showed a lot of grit and determination, and some of their players didn't even have their best match, as Thayer Hall had 10 kills, but she also had 10 hitting errors for a hitting percentage of 0. Tara Caesar had 20 kills and hit .311. She had 6 hitting errors, but the positives outweigh the negative. And they even got contributions from Lauren Forte, who had 12 kills, only 1 hitting error, and she hit .579. And Holly Carlton also had 9 kills, 1 hitting error, and hit .421. As a team, Florida had 9 service aces and only missed 6 serves, which isn't bad. They also had 61 digs. 23 of them went to Ellie McKissock, and 12 of them went to Caesar. And in terms of blocks, as a team, Florida had 7 blocks. And as a team, in terms of hitting percentage, Florida hit .293, which is pretty darn impressive. So I honestly have to admit it. I was wrong about Florida, and I'm willing to eat my crow. So here's your little applause button. So there was that in terms of Florida's stats. Now for Kentucky stats. Kentucky actually had a lot of offensive contribution, as they were led by Avery Skinner, who had 20 kills, only 3 hitting errors for a hitting percentage of .386. Azani Teeler chipped in 18 kills, only had 3 hitting errors for a hitting percentage of .600. That's pretty darn impressive. The one who really struggled for Kentucky was Allie Stumler, who had 15 kills, 10 hitting errors for a hitting percentage of .94. That's not going to get the job done. And then Maddie Skinner, Avery's sister, had 11 kills, 5 hitting errors for a hitting percentage of .206. In terms of aces and service errors, Kentucky had 5 service aces and missed 12 serves, 3 of which went to Madison Lilly, who also chipped in 3 kills and 59 assists, while Stumler, who had pretty much a bad hitting night, made up for it in terms of service aces with 2. In terms of digs, Kentucky had 57 digs, 23 of them went to Gabby Curry, 12 of them went to Lilly, and that's pretty much your noteworthy dig leaders. In terms of blocks, there were no solo stuffs for Kentucky, but they had 8 blocks as a team. They had 16 block assists, which was pretty much ideal. That's pretty much what was trying to stop Florida. And as a team, here's the interesting part. Kentucky hit .312. When you're hitting that type of a hitting percentage, you're more likely going to win those matches instead of losing those matches. So, honestly, I'm surprised Kentucky lost despite having that high of a hitting percentage, but that just goes to show you how offensively consistent Kentucky can be, even in a bad match. So it was obviously a tough loss, but I think Kentucky's better off losing now than losing in the NCAA tournament, because obviously it's tough to go undefeated, and most teams can vouch that it really is tough to go a full season undefeated. And in any sport, at any level, it's tough to go undefeated. So Kentucky did take that L, but they made up for it as they actually dominated the second match, as Kentucky swept Florida at Florida, which I was very surprised they swept Florida the second time. I thought with Florida riding the momentum, they would have won that match. But I guess you can't keep Kentucky down. So there's that right there. Now let's travel to the ACC. As we will get this other upset between North Carolina and Notre Dame. So here's the deal with Notre Dame and North Carolina. Notre Dame was still pretty much on top of the leaderboard in terms of the ACC, while North Carolina had a slim hope of attempting to win the ACC. Before we get into the recap of Notre Dame and North Carolina, we actually have some volleyball news coming out of the ACC, which means one thing. So yes, big volleyball news coming out of the ACC in terms of volleyball. So in terms of the ACC, Virginia's women's volleyball team has pretty much canceled the rest of its season. They've opted out. It was most likely because of COVID protocols and maybe the limited number of players, but Virginia is not going to be finishing up the remainder of its season. I believe they have become the second Power 5 team to opt out the remainder of the season, as Auburn actually opted out of the spring season in terms of all of their sports. So it's kind of a bummer, but Virginia wasn't really in the position to win the ACC. I don't even think they were in the position to win the NCAA tournament. As a matter of fact, they were not in the position to winning the NCAA tournament, which is a bummer for them and a bummer for the seniors. But in all honesty, they were pretty much going to be everyone's speed bump, which I feel bad for them, but it would have been great to see them get at least one win. So there's that. Now let's get on into the recap of Notre Dame and North Carolina. So this was a very weird match for North Carolina and Notre Dame. North Carolina isn't really the best team out of the ACC, but they're certainly not the worst team. I mean, they still have a glimmer of hope of winning the ACC, but they're going to need a lot of help along the way, as they actually won the first set. The first set was neck and neck, as there were 11 ties and 7 lead changes, but North Carolina was able to grind out the first set 25-23, which kind of had me surprised. I was like, okay, it was a tight set, but nothing Notre Dame can't bounce back from. And in the second set, it was another tight set, as there were 9 ties and only 2 lead changes, but North Carolina was able to have a little bit more success and a little bit more breathing room in that second set, winning the second set 25-21 and leading 2-0 in the match. And I'm like, are you kidding me? I don't have a dog in this fight, but I will say this. Notre Dame looked really off in this game. I couldn't believe how horrid they looked. In set 1, they hit 194, and in set 2, they hit 0. They had 8 kills and 8 hitting errors. That's not going to get the job done. North Carolina was no better, as they hit 175 in the first set, and in set 2, they hit 91, which was also atrocious. But for Notre Dame, one of the highly touted teams in the ACC, I expected them to do a whole lot better, especially since last week they lost to Florida State, which really has them behind the 8 ball. Oh, I'm sorry, not last week. A couple weeks ago, they lost to Florida State. Now they're in a situation where they pretty much need every win possible in the ACC if they want to win the ACC and automatically qualify for the NCAA tournament. So set 3 was pretty much a whole different set. Notre Dame led most of the way. There were only 5 ties and 1 lead change, as the Fighting Irish took the third set 25-21. Set 4 was mostly different, as Notre Dame, for the most part, was strong in that set, winning set 4 25-21. And then I was thinking, okay, here's the Notre Dame we were all looking for. This is what we came to see in terms of Notre Dame. So Notre Dame forced a 5th set against North Carolina, and it looked as if Notre Dame was going to pull off the reverse sweep just like they did against Pitt back in the month of October. Except North Carolina wasn't having it. It was tight early on in the 5th set, but the Tar Heels were able to pull away from the Fighting Irish in set 5, winning the 5th set 15-9 and handing Notre Dame their 3rd loss of ACC play, as now Notre Dame is pretty much in a dire situation where they pretty much have to run the table in the ACC. Otherwise, they won't be winning the ACC anytime soon. So, good win for North Carolina, though. That is probably their biggest win of the season, considering they haven't had too many noteworthy wins. So, I really have to tip my hat to the Tar Heels. I didn't think they would pull off this win, as they were atrocious. North Carolina hit 136 for the match. That's when you know your team was struggling offensively. They were on the struggle bus in the whole match. And they were led by Sky Howard, who had 15 kills, but those 15 kills are getting overshadowed by the fact that she had 12 hitting errors and she only hit 53, which that right there is not a good sign for North Carolina. Like, your star player cannot have that bad of a hitting night. But she did also get contributions from Emily Zinger, who was the best offensive player for North Carolina, who had 14 kills, 5 hitting errors for a hitting percentage of .220, which is pretty good. North Carolina also got 10 kills apiece from Kea Merkler and Amanda Fegley, but both of those players hit under 200. So it's quite the bummer, but it is what it is. Annabelle Archer had 43 assists, and in terms of service aces and service errors, North Carolina had 8 service aces and 7 service errors, which is pretty good. In terms of digs, they had 81 digs, 24 went to Karina Whirl, 13 went to Olivia Diaz, and 10 apiece went to Emily Zinger and Annabelle Archer. In terms of blocks, North Carolina really shined in this category as they had 13 blocks, which kind of also contributes to the low hitting percentages that both teams had. Like, no player or no team had a hitting percentage higher than 237. So it's quite impressive that North Carolina really performed well. And here's the thing about North Carolina. In terms of offense, they actually hit 237 compared to Notre Dame's 208 in set 3, yet they lost that set. So it kind of makes me wonder what the heck happened to Notre Dame, as Notre Dame was led by Charlie Nigo, who had 21 kills, but she had 10 hitting errors for a hitting percentage of 164, which was kind of I mean, it wasn't bad that she had 21 kills, but those 10 hitting errors, that kind of also contributes to North Carolina's blocking game, which that really is impressive when it comes to North Carolina's defense. Considering North Carolina hasn't had too many big victories, and considering they've had inconsistencies in terms of being able to take the court, in terms of like COVID and whatnot, it's impressive that North Carolina showed up with a belly full of fire in terms of defense. Notre Dame also got 14 kills from Caroline Muth and 9 kills from Lindsay Miller. Zoe Nunez had 47 assists, while in terms of service aces and service errors, the Fighting Irish made 7 aces and had 6 service errors. In terms of digs, Notre Dame had 80 digs. 24 of them went to Nunez, while 19 of them went to Hattie Monson, 16 of them went to Kiara Schmidt, and 10 of them went to Nigo. And also 9 digs went to Caroline Muth. But as a team, Notre Dame hit 149, which that's not the Notre Dame I know and love, considering Notre Dame has so much talent on that team. They have young talent, I get it, and they were also on the road, but Notre Dame is definitely capable of beating North Carolina. I'm sorry, but this was not a good loss. I think this loss is pretty much on par with the Florida State loss. I mean, in the defense of Notre Dame in terms of the Florida State loss, Florida State was on fire. I think they had won 6 in a row before they beat Notre Dame that game. But against North Carolina, this was a match that Notre Dame knew they had to win if they wanted to keep their ACC hopes alive. Now they are in danger, and now they're going to need help along the way. I'll be talking more about the ACC, but for right now, we shall close the book on the ACC. So now let's jump to the Pac-12 in terms of notable upsets that have happened. And we'll start with Utah versus Colorado. So Utah, I believe Utah was like number 11 in terms of the ACC standings or ACC polls. And honestly, Utah, I thought was going to do so much better than this. But I guess when it comes to Rumble and the Rockies, Utah really laid an egg. The first set looked promising as Utah took the first set 25-19. However, Colorado woke up and took the second set 25-23. There were 7 ties and 4 lead changes. In set number 3, Utah showed up and showed out as they took the third set 25-15. And then at that point, I was thinking, okay, Utah has got this match in the bag. There's no way they can beat Colorado. Colorado, prior to this match, has one standout win, and they always find a way to lose in these situations against these ranked teams. So then in set 4, Colorado actually decided to prove me wrong, as they never trailed that match. They never trailed in set 4 and won the fourth set 25-22, and I'm like, okay, Colorado actually is doing some good. Then in set 5, there were 3 ties, 3 lead changes, but Colorado was able to pull away and win set 5 by a score of 15-13, which really stunned me. I'm like, oh wow, I can't believe it. Utah actually lost. Utah has been, if there's one word to describe Utah and UCLA, it's inconsistent. Like, Utah does not do well against ranked opponents, and then they find a way to almost lose or find a way to lose against unranked opponents. And UCLA, on the other hand, is inconsistent on a 2-series basis, as they find a way to dominate the first match and pull off an upset win. And then in the second match, they find a way to go 2 steps back. And then against unranked opponents, UCLA always finds a way to either lose one match, or they find a way to almost lose that match. So, honestly, I don't know what's going to happen with Utah and UCLA. I know UCLA is no longer in the running for the Pac-12 championship, which I'm going to get into that in a little bit. But for right now, let's go over Colorado's stats. Colorado was led by Leah Clayton, who had 22 kills, but she had 9 hitting errors for only a hitting percentage of 188. Alyssa Alcantara had 12 kills, 8 hitting errors for a hitting percentage of 129, and Sterling Parker, in my opinion, was the most consistent hitter offensively for Colorado, as she had 11 kills, 1 hitting error for a hitting percentage of 155. Colorado ran a 6-2 offense, just like UCLA, as Jenna Ewert had 29 assists and Brenna DeLuzio had 24 assists. In terms of aces, service aces, and service errors, Colorado had 8 service aces while missing 7 serves. In terms of blocks, Colorado had 10 team blocks, 1 was a solo stuff, and 18 were block assists. In terms of digs, Colorado had 80 digs. Zoe Neverdowski had 24 digs, while DeLuzio chipped in 16. Maya Tabron had 15, and Clayton added 11. As a team, Colorado hit .234, which is kind of good. I honestly think that's an okay hitting percentage. Like, when you're facing UCLA, or I'm sorry, not UCLA, a team like Utah, your hitting percentage has got to be high, and you got to be on your A game. But I will also say this, Colorado really impressed me. I thought their win over UCLA a couple weeks ago was kind of a fluke, but I guess Colorado is better than what most people give them credit for. I still don't see Colorado making the NCAA tournament. They're 6-9 in terms of the Pac-12 and their overall standings, and they're in no position of winning the Pac-12. So there's that. In terms of Utah, they were led by Danny Drews, who had 24 kills, 11 hitting errors for a hitting percentage of .241. Despite the 11 hitting errors, she actually hit in the mid-240s, which isn't bad. Madeline Robinson had 18 kills, only 2 hitting errors for a hitting percentage of .308, which isn't bad. Like, only 2 hitting errors, but she had multiple swings. That's pretty decent. And then Kenzie Korber had 11 kills, and she hit .200 for the match. Sage Torres had 48 assists, while this was the surprising stat. Utah had 9 service aces, and they only missed 2 serves, yet they found a way to lose to Colorado. It's like, with a service ace and service error ratio like that, any ranked team can beat Colorado. But Utah surprisingly found a way to lose, which I don't get it. And then also Utah outblocked Colorado as they had 13 team blocks, 24 were block assists, and 1 was a solo block. And in terms of digs, this was the category that I think that hurt Utah. They had 70 digs compared to Colorado's 80. 23 of them went to Torres, 13 went to Drews, 11 went to Korber, and Vanessa Ramirez had 12. And as a team, Utah hit .239, so they hit no better than Colorado. But still, the service ace and service error ratio, and pretty much your top players having pretty good nights, kind of yields a red flag for Utah. So I'm more concerned about Utah going forward, just because they don't seem to do well against ranked competition, other than that 1 win against UCLA. But UCLA is kind of that mid-tier team this year, even though they've had some good standout wins. But I will also say this, Utah has now been struggling with the not-so-great competition. And even when they win, Utah struggles against their unranked competition. So Utah has a lot to learn going forward, but I will say this, Utah did sweep Colorado the second go-around, and they got their head coach, Beth Laramie, her 600th win, which was pretty darn impressive if you ask me. So good job to Utah on registering her 600th win, which was very impressive, and it's good stuff. Like, that win is... Oh, I'm sorry, not her last name isn't Laramie. It's Beth. I'm going to butcher this name. Beth Lanieri. So Beth Lanieri has 600 wins for Utah. So good stuff. On another note, in terms of 600 coaches reaching 600 wins, John Cook, the Nebraska head coach, won his 600th win with Nebraska as the Cornhuskers were able to win their match this past weekend. I believe they faced Iowa, if I'm not mistaken. If not, it was like Michigan. Either way, Nebraska registered the win, and they were able to get John Cook his 600th victory. So good for Coach Beth and Coach John. So there's that. Now staying in the Pac-12, we have another upset to go over. We have USC versus number 15 UCLA. So this match was also weird. So the first set, it looked as if UCLA was going to dominate the first set as they were up 24-21 at that point. And I'm thinking, okay, UCLA is going to win this first set. And then for some reason, USC comes to life. They dodge so many match points, and they take the first set 27-25. And I'm like, okay then. And then in the second set, it was more of the same. It was actually quite tight in the second set, but USC actually found a way to break the set open and take the second set 25-23. And I'm like, okay, this is pretty cool. USC's up on UCLA. I am pro USC, but I do respect everything that UCLA has done this year, especially considering Mike Sealy sometimes comes under fire every time UCLA loses a match that they sometimes win. I pretty much see it all over the Twitterverse, seeing, Mike's, and my apologies, I said John Sealy, it's Mike Sealy. So I always see on Twitter, Mike Sealy cost us the victory. It's like, no, he didn't. Sealy is not the one that's causing your team to lose. Like, cut him some slack. He's the reason why UCLA has won an NCAA championship. So, stop it. Anyway, back to the USC-UCLA match. UCLA dominated the third set as they won the third set 25-14 in blowout fashion. Then the fourth set, it was quite tight as it looked as if USC was going to put the match away, but then UCLA pulled away in the latter part of set 4 and won 25-21, forcing a fifth set. And then in set 5, now the set was rather close, but the box scores in set 5 won't do it any justice, as there was only one tie and 0 lead changes. USC led the entire way, and USC was actually up 11-7 at one point, but then the score was eventually 13-11, and I'm thinking, okay, well, maybe UCLA could pull this out in the end. But unfortunately for UCLA, USC was able to grind out the victory, winning set 5 by a score of 15-11 and completing the upset over UCLA, which was quite impressive. USC has not had the greatest season, as they've had their season paused due to COVID. They've had a young team. They have a first-year head coach. All that type of jazz. And they've had a lot of inconsistent losses. They've had a lot of losses to teams that they probably should have beaten. So there's that. So USC was led by Brooke Botkin, the Pac-12 Offensive Player of the Week, as she had 23 kills, 6 hitting errors for a hitting percentage of .250. Brooklyn Shermer, who has been quite the surprise this year, added 16 kills and a hitting percentage of .233. And Candace Denny, who was a transfer from Arizona State, had 11 kills and a hitting percentage of .400. Laquel Lazaro had 56 assists, while USC only had 4 service aces and 6 service errors. In terms of digs, USC had 69 digs. 19 of them went to Botkin, 13 of them went to Lazaro and Sophia Theriot, and 11 of them went to Shermer. In terms of team blocks, USC really shined in this category. They had 13 team blocks. They had 22 block assists and 2 solo stuffs. And as a team, USC only hit .240, which is quite surprising. In set 5, USC hit .429. They had 9 kills and 0 hitting errors, which is quite nice. As for UCLA, they were led by Mac May, who had 25 kills, a hitting percentage of 304. She did have 8 hitting errors, which wasn't the greatest, but what could we do? And Elon McCall also stepped up for UCLA as she had 24 kills. Iman Njai had 9 kills and hit 250. McCall hit 408, which was very impressive. She had only 4 hitting errors, and when you're putting up 24 kills, that's a great little ratio to have. UCLA ran their 6-2 offense as Kate Lane had 30 assists while Audrey Pack has 29 assists. We still have no whereabouts of Devin Chang's recent injury back when she injured it against UCLA, or when she injured it against Washington. So we don't know the whereabouts of that. In terms of service aces and service errors, UCLA had 4 aces, while service errors they had 7. UCLA had 73 team blocks, 23 of them went to Zoe Fleck, 19 went to McCall, 12 of them went to May, which were pretty much your dig standout leaders. In terms of blocks, UCLA had 9 team blocks, 2 of them were solo stuffs, and 14 of them were block assists. And UCLA hit 318, which really surprised me. I thought UCLA was going to do a lot better, especially since USC has had such an inconsistent season. But I guess this is why they call them rivalry games, and pretty much when everyone says, when it comes to rivalry games, just throw them out the window. So there's that. So that's pretty much all the upsets that happened, or all the noteworthy upsets that happened. In terms of all the noteworthy matchups that happened, Ohio State beat Michigan twice, which was no real surprise. The Buckeyes have done really well. In terms of the Summit League, Kansas City. Now, Kansas City is the newest team in the Summit League, as they just recently transferred from the Western Athletic Conference. But Kansas City went on the road to South Dakota and beat them not once, but twice in 5-set matches, which was really impressive. Kansas City of Missouri has the lead in the Summit League in terms of the regular season, as they have 2 matches to go. I'll be talking about them in a little bit. Let's go to the men's matchup. So I'm going to try to speed along through this. So in terms of these 2 upsets, so I don't know if we can really call them upsets, considering I think one of these teams is better than most people give them credit for, but Loyola of Chicago beat McKendree, number 8 McKendree, not once, but twice, which was very impressive. And honestly, I was very surprised that McKendree lost both these matchups. The first matchup, Loyola won in straight sets. They swept McKendree. And then the second match, Loyola won the second matchup in 4 sets, which was darn right impressive. And in both matchups, McKendree did not have one player that cracked double digits in terms of kills. While in the second matchup, Loyola had 3 players crack double digits and in terms of kills, and when it came to the first matchup, Loyola had 2 players crack double digits in terms of kills. They could have had 3, but unfortunately Cole Schlofhauser was 2 kills short of cracking double digits, which it's still impressive. So that's pretty much the brief upset of it. It's the Diet Coke version of it. But I will also say this, Loyola of Chicago has pulled into a tie with McKendree in the MIVA conference, which is very impressive. So good for Loyola, and if they keep this up, they could, hence the words could, maybe take the MIVA. But we still have Lewis of Romeoville to contend with, or they have Lewis of Romeoville to contend with. What's this wheat thing? Okay, so now let's get over to this other men's volleyball upset. So this one was rather odd and surprising. This one actually came at the hands of I believe they were number 8 or number 7 in the AVCA polls, Grand Canyon against winless Stanford. Stanford had no wins coming in. And here's the thing about Stanford. Stanford is going to be losing their men's volleyball program at the end of the season, because Stanford is cutting that along with 9 other sports, which is very sad face. But Stanford was able to sweep Grand Canyon, winning in straight sets 25-23, 25-22, and 25-22. Stanford was led by Capono Brown, who had 14 kills. Luke Turner added 12 kills, which was very impressive. And I was quite impressed with how Stanford got the win. Although the match was tight in terms of all the sets, Stanford was able to grind it out and win at Maples Pavilion. And Grand Canyon is pretty good. They're not the greatest team in the MPSF conference, but I will also say this. Grand Canyon has shown inconsistencies against other teams. But I will also say I also should note that Grand Canyon did beat then number 1 BYU, so there's that right there. So that's that for that little matchup. And in this matchup, I really want to get into. This was between Long Beach State and UC Santa Barbara. So in a nutshell of the first match, UC Santa Barbara showed why they were the number 3 team in the nation, as they won that matchup in 4 sets. However, this was Long Beach State's first match or first series of the season, as they got a real late start to the season. They didn't get to play any non-conference games, which was quite the bummer, which I also kind of wonder why Long Beach didn't get to have a non-conference series against Big West opponents. I mean, Hawaii was able to do it. UC Irvine was able to do it. UC San Diego was able to do it. UC Santa Barbara was able to do it. So I wonder why Long Beach couldn't do that. It could have been because of lack of preparation or lack of practice time because of COVID and whatnot. So there's that. So the second matchup surprisingly went Long Beach State's way. But the first set, it looked pretty tight as UC Santa Barbara took the first set 25-23. There were 10 ties and 5 lead changes. The second set, Long Beach State came to life, and they actually showed a lot of grit and resolve. That's the thing about Long Beach that really has me thinking, is this really considered an upset? Long Beach State works hard night in and night out when it comes to their matches, and they are so much better than what most people give them credit for. As they took the second set 25-21, Long Beach State then took the third set 25-20, and in set 4, Long Beach State didn't even bother wanting UC Santa Barbara to force a fifth set, as they took the fourth set 25-21, securing the upset over UC Santa Barbara. I don't know if this can be considered an upset considering, again, Long Beach State has a great team year in and year out. The only problem is that they got overshadowed with all their graduates that happened, such as DeFalco, Tuaniga, and then also Carlos Rivera, the setter of Long Beach State from last year, decided to quit. Well, not like quit, but step away from the team because of other things in his life. But the fact that Long Beach State was able to pull out the win the second time around really impressed me. That just goes to show you that Long Beach is not going anywhere, and all these rankings are complete baloney sausage. I'm just saying, y'all. As for Long Beach State, they had 5 players reach double digits in terms of kills. That is the great thing about Long Beach. They don't just have one dominant player. They have multiple dominant players. As Long Beach State was led by Spencer Olivier, who had 16 kills, only 4 hitting errors for a hitting percentage of .333. Clark Godbold had 13 kills, only hit .233, which wasn't too bad. Shane Holdaway had 12 kills, only one hitting error for a hitting percentage of .579. And Simone Anderson and Simon Torwey each had 11 kills. Anderson did not have one hitting error, and he hit .579, while Torwey hit .188, which wasn't bad. This was his first series at Long Beach State, so it's quite impressive. As for assists, now this guy is only a freshman, and he is the starting setter, as Aiden Knipe had 57 assists. He also had 3 kills, which were his first collegiate kills, so good stuff for Long Beach State. In terms of aces and service errors, Long Beach State had 3 service aces, but they missed 17 serves. Missing serves is very natural when it comes to men's volleyball, especially for Long Beach State, because they have a bunch of jump servers. But I will also say this, as long as Long Beach State is making up for their service errors, they're not in any danger, and the service errors don't mean jack diddly. In terms of blocks, Long Beach State had quite a good number of blocks, as they had 6 solo blocks and 13 block assists for a grand total of 12.5 blocks as a team. So good stuff for Long Beach State. In terms of digs, this was the category that Long Beach State excelled in, as they had 58 digs. 17 of them went to Olivier, 13 of them went to Godbold, and 11 of them went to Torwey. So that's 3 double-doubles right there. And Mason Briggs had 9 digs, so that was good as well. Long Beach State also hit 345, which just shows that whenever Long Beach State is having a great night in terms of offense, that's when Long Beach State is at their best, no matter who they're facing. And that could be the scary thing about Long Beach State. As for UC Santa Barbara, they were led by Randy DeWeese, who had 17 kills. He was their only player in double digits in terms of kills, as Ryan Wilcox had 8 kills, Roy McFarland had 6 kills, and Keenan Sanders had 7. Casey McGeary had 34 assists, while UC Santa Barbara only had 4 aces, and they missed 8 serves. Now, UC Santa Barbara really struggled in this category. They only had 5.5 team blocks, as 11 of their blocks were block assists, and that was that. Like, if you're not stopping Long Beach State offensively in the blocking game, your team's really going to struggle. I don't know how UC Santa Barbara was able to grind out that first match win, but I will also say this. I think UC Santa Barbara is kind of starting to show a little suspectness, in my opinion. I mean, you would think with having faced the number 1 team last week in Hawaii and having 4 matches under your belt in terms of non-conference play, you would think UC Santa Barbara would have a better showing against Long Beach State, but I think they really underestimated Long Beach. It's also because Long Beach is a great team year in and year out. They have a great coaching staff. Alan Knipe does a great job with his team. He always gets them really prepared, but I thought Santa Barbara was going to do better, especially since they're the number 3 team in the nation, so there's that. In terms of digs, the Gauchos had 51 digs. 17 of them, surprisingly, went to Dane Chalmers. Now, I've known Dane Chalmers for quite a while. I saw him throughout his volleyball career, and I did not know he was going to play. This was a pleasant surprise, and then when I first saw the box score, I was like, whoa, this guy, Dane played. So I presume he was the libero, because the fact that he was able to garner 17 digs is quite astounding. Ryan Wilcox also had 14 digs as well, and then Casey McGeary had 9 digs to boot as well. And as a team, UC Santa Barbara really struggled in terms of hitting percentages. They only hit 194. That's when UC Santa Barbara is at their worst. And that's when Long Beach State is also at their best. When Long Beach is blocking the ball and stopping you at the net, you're going to be struggling. So I was very impressed with Long Beach State. As a student, I'm not going to try to go too full homer on them, but I will say this, Long Beach State isn't going anywhere. Now, does this mean they're going to win the Big West Conference? That still remains to be seen, especially since the Big West Conference tournament is what's going to get them into the NCAA tournament. That right there, they need to win that in order to automatically qualify for the NCAA tournament. But I will say this about Long Beach, they look very promising to start. It is early in the season, but I think this could be the start of something really special for the Beach, as personally, I think this is going to be a special team. There will be some growing pains along the way, but I think the Beach still has it, as Long Beach will continue play against UC Irvine this weekend. They play UC Irvine at the Pyramid on Friday, while they play the Anteaters on Saturday at UC Irvine, aka the Bren Event Center. Like, the entire Big West Conference is going to be tough for them. Like, Long Beach State was chosen to finish 5th in the Big West Conference. 5th. I believe UC San Diego was 4th. UC Irvine was 3rd. UC Santa Barbara was 2nd, and Hawaii was 1st. Oh, and then also Cal State Northridge was picked to finish last, which I'll also go over that a little briefly. But Long Beach State, I think, has that little underdog mentality, and they have no pressure considering the past few years they've had the pressure of being at the tippy top. However, now that they have the underdog mentality, they don't have much to lose, and they're basically going to feed off the negativity, and they're doing a great job of not listening to the outside noise. Before we wrap up all the upsets that happened, I also do want to give a shout to Cal State Northridge's men's volleyball team, as they were able to beat UC Irvine in 4 sets. Now, I've bagged on Northridge quite a bit. I don't want to say that Northridge is bad, but I didn't think too highly of Northridge this year. I thought Northridge was kind of going to be the doormat of the Big West Conference, but them pulling off that impressive victory over UC Irvine kind of has me thinking the Big West Conference as a whole could be something special this year. This could basically be the AFC North of men's volleyball. Or the NFC West of men's volleyball. So I think NFC West kind of fits the Big West Conference a lot more. As we also say hello to Marcus Losgreat, who just popped in the chat room, saying his standard, what up, doe. And he says, Tuesday crew in the house. And Marcus says, I better recognize. Yeah, I do. Yeah, I recognize that. So yeah, thank you for popping in, Marcus. And I'm glad he is in here. He just got here now because luckily he missed out on something that was unfortunate for his GCU Lopes. I might as well just say it now. Marcus, unfortunately, Grand Canyon lost to Stanford, but that's okay because Grand Canyon's still having a good season. The fact that they beat BYU is impressive. And it's only 1 loss. Like, there's still plenty of time for them to make up for it in terms of the MPSF. So, Grand Canyon still is not to be slept on, but the loss against Stanford kind of left a bad taste in my mouth. I'm sorry, Marcus. I didn't want to leave you in suspense, but I'm sorry, Marcus. But who knows? Maybe Grand Canyon will bounce back. So, yeah, he was surprised. I was surprised as well. So, that's going to do it for all the recap of last week's noteworthy matchups. Hey, at least USC won in terms of women's volleyball, right, Marcus? So anyway, we're going to take ourselves a quick little commercial break. When we come back, we're going to preview some noteworthy women's volleyball matches, and we'll also preview some men's volleyball matchups, if possible, as well. So you're listening to Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
Hey guys, it's Blake Henley, better known as H-Town Blake to some of you. Happy to announce that Bases Loaded is back in full force. We'll be bringing that high heat every Tuesday night here on IE Sports Radio. So come home, get ready, dig into that batter's box, and see if you can chase that high heat, baby. So we'll be coming to you live with all the stats, all the rundowns, all the division rivalries, and every team that's going to make the playoff push to get to that one and only October and get to the pinnacle of what baseball is, to hoist that Commissioner's Trophy when it's all said and done.
What's good, fight fans? It's your boy, Marcus Losgreat, here to give ya what you want, here to give ya what you need. Yeah, man. Yeah. I'm coming to you live, straight from your mama's basement with a crispy, awesome white tea. They're coming to you live every Tuesday at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Powered by IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
And we're back with segment 2 of Set Point. You can check out all those amazing shows on iSports Radio's Spreaker account, and you can also check them out through Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, TuneIn, YouTube, you name it. And that last drop was courtesy of Marcus Losgreat, as Mr. Marcus Losgreat will be going live with Gloves Off later on tonight at 7 p.m. Pacific Time, 10 p.m. Eastern Time. So you better tune in, because if not, you're going to be missing on all of the boxing and MMA action and combat sports action. So don't you dare miss it. So there's that right there. So now let's get on into segment 2 of Set Point. So before we get into the preview of all of these noteworthy volleyball matchups, we got to go through the AVCA coaches polls. We'll start off with the women's coaches poll, the women's top 25 coaches poll. We'll start off with 25 through 21. Number 25 is Florida State. Number 24 is Missouri. Number 23 is Notre Dame. Number 22 is Georgia Tech. And number 21 is San Diego. 20 through 16, 20 is Pepperdine. 19 is Pitt. 18 is Western Kentucky. 17 is UCLA. And 16 is Oregon. 15 through 11. 15 is BYU, 14 is Louisville, 13 is Washington State, 12 is Utah, and 11 is Penn State. 10 through 6. 10 is Purdue, 9 is Ohio State, 8 is Washington, 7 is Florida, and Baylor is number 6. Now, 5 through 1, number 5 is Nebraska, number 4 is Minnesota, number 3 is Kentucky, who still stays steady despite the loss to the Gators this past week. Number 2 is Texas, and your still number 1 team in the AVCA coaches poll is Wisconsin, which is no surprise. So there's your top 25 women's volleyball coaches polls. Now let's go to the top 15 men's volleyball coaches polls. Number 15 through 11. 15 is George Mason. 14 is Loyola of Chicago. 13 is UC Irvine. 12 is UC San Diego. And number 11 is NJIT, who lost both of their matchups to Penn State this past weekend. So not good for the Highlanders. 10 through 6, 10 is McKendree, 9 is Grand Canyon. See, Marcus? Grand Canyon's all right. 8 is Penn State, 7 is Long Beach State, and 6 is UCLA. 5 through 1, number 5 is Pepperdine, number 4 is Lewis, number 3 is UC Santa Barbara, despite the loss to Long Beach State. Number 2 is BYU, and the still number 1 team in the AVCA men's volleyball coaches poll is Hawaii, who is undefeated still. Matter of fact, I think they are indeed the only undefeated team that remains in NCAA Division 1 and 2 men's volleyball. So now let us jump to the NCAA beach volleyball coaches poll. So 20 through 16, number 20 is Florida Gulf Coast. Number 19 is Long Beach State. Number 18 is Stanford. Number 17 is Georgia State. And number 16 is Stetson. 15 through 11. 15 is South Carolina. 14 is Arizona. 13 is Florida International University. 12 is Florida Atlantic University. And 11 is Cal. 10 through 6. 10 is Hawaii. 9 is TCU. 8 is Grand Canyon. Hey, look at that. Grand Canyon again. 17 is Pepperdine, and 6 is Loyola Marymount, or LMU. 5 through 1, number 5 is Cal Poly. Number 4 is UCLA. Number 3 is LSU. Number 2, barely by a couple votes, is Florida State. And your number 1 team in the AVCA beach volleyball coaches poll is USC, who occupies the top spot by themselves, as last week they had to share that top spot with Florida State. So there is that right there in terms of the coaches' polls of beach volleyball, men's volleyball, and women's volleyball in the NCAA. So there's that. We're actually going to take one more quick little commercial break. When we come back, we will be previewing all the noteworthy NCAA men's and women's volleyball matches. And then we'll send you all on your way. So you're listening to Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
Ladies and gentlemen, hear me and hear me good. If you like sports, then you like the Wait a Minute Show. If you like comedy, then you like the Wait a Minute Show. If you like a different opinion coming from a different angle, then you like the Wait a Minute Show. So join me Saturday, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with your host, Jelani J.B. Bodie. And of course, my man Lopan on the WaitAMinuteShow.com. Ain't that right, Lopan?
And we are back with Set Point. Sorry if I had to step out for a little bit. Just had to take care of a quick little business call and / text, and we are back. So now let us preview the NCAA noteworthy volleyball matchups for this week. And we're mainly going to do the women's side, as the men's side there's not too much going on. There's not too many groundbreaking matches, unfortunately. But we'll make it do what it do. Some noteworthy matchups on the men's side include Long Beach State, UC Irvine. Yes, I have to include that, considering that is basically the blue and gold matchup, and it's a rivalry matchup. And then UC Santa Barbara takes on Cal State Northridge, which I'm interested to see how Northridge fares against UC Santa Barbara, just because this will basically prove if their win was a fluke or it was for real. And then Pepperdine has a 3-game series against Grand Canyon this weekend. They play Grand Canyon all at Pepper and Malibu on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So there's that in terms of noteworthy men's volleyball matchups. But those are my quick hits in terms of the men's volleyball matchups. Now let's jump into the preview of all the noteworthy NCAA women's volleyball matchups for this week. So the first noteworthy matchup for this week's matchup is Texas versus Baylor. So this is actually going to be the fourth matchup between the Bears and the Longhorns. The Longhorns have won the previous 3 matchups, but all 3 of those matchups came at the University of Texas. As the Longhorns won the first matchup in 5 sets, they won the second matchup in 5 sets, they won the third matchup in 4 sets, and now this time this matchup is going to be taking place in Waco, Texas, at the University of Baylor. So Texas, the number 2 team in the nation, is led by Logan Eggleston, who has 312 kills, but it's not just her. Logan Eggleston has help in terms of offense, as she is aided by Skylar Fields, Asia O'Neal, Breon Butler, Molly Phillips, and even Jenna Gabriel, who does the assists as well. She sets her teammates up for success. She's the setter. And also Melanie Parra has gotten into the mix of the Texas offense. So there's that. Jenna Gabriel, like I said, is the setter, as she has 774 assists. While in terms of serves, Eggleston has that mean jump serve, which really puts teams on their butts more times than not. In terms of digs, they have 5 players with over 100 digs. And then in terms of blocks, they have such a tall team. They have Butler leading the way in blocks, while Fields is also up there in blocks. O'Neal, who is actually the daughter of Jermaine O'Neal, is up there in blocks with 78. And as a team, Texas hits 335 while their opponents hit 161. So there's that right there. Now as for Baylor, we all know they're the number 6 team in the nation, but they are hungry for a possible upset against the Longhorns. Baylor is led by none other than Yasonia Presley, who has 387 kills. Marquis Vandermark has 174 kills, and Cara McGee has 154 kills. But Lauren Harrison has been just as big of a surprise for Baylor, as she has 241 kills on the season. So those are your offensive powerhouses right there. In terms of assists, now Baylor has been using two setters. They went from 5-1 to 6-2 in some of their matches, as Callie Williams has 562 assists, while Hannah Sedgwick has 303 assists. In terms of digs, they are led by Chanel Bram-Schreiber, who has 308 digs. They also have dig contributions from Lakey Harper, Callie Williams, Campbell Bowden, and Emily Van Slate. As a team, Baylor is hitting 270 while their opponents are hitting 152. And then in terms of blocks, they are led by McGee, who has 103 blocks altogether, while Vandermark has 66 blocks altogether. Here's the thing about Baylor, though. Here's the big thing that concerns me about Baylor. Baylor has been very inconsistent. Last week, they had to go 5 sets with Rice and Houston, which Houston is not the greatest team in the NCAA, as well as Rice. Rice is okay, but they're certainly not worthy of being ranked. But the fact that Baylor had to rally back to beat both those teams is kind of concerning. Against Houston, they were down 2-0 in the match, and they were lucky to reverse sweep them. Well, not lucky, but they were fortunate to reverse sweep them. There's the word. And then against Rice, then Baylor actually fell behind 2-1 in the match, but was able to win the 4th set and the 5th set. So my concern for Baylor is that they haven't been consistently dominant in all their matches. And against Pepperdine, now granted Pepperdine's a great team, but they had to go 5 sets with Pep, which, I don't know, that's kind of concerning if you ask me. Baylor will have to be the second place representative of the Big 12 conference, as they finish second in the conference, which is some cool stuff right there. But my thing for Baylor is that I think Texas is going to hand them their first loss at home. And that's the thing that kind of made me ponder. Will Baylor be able to win at home? My thing is, yes, I think they have a shot, but I think Texas is just too loaded. They are loaded with talent, and honestly, I think that's going to be a recipe for disaster if you are Baylor. And even in some of their other matches, Baylor's had to go 5 sets with some of these other teams, not just Houston and Rice. They had to go 5 with Kansas, which they lost, but that was the first match of the season. They had to go 5 with Oklahoma. They had to go 5 with Texas Tech. And then they had to go 5 both times with Texas in their conference play. And then, like I said, they went 5 with Pepperdine and was able to win that one. But Pepperdine was just getting started with their season, and that's a road matchup that is going to be one tough matchup to win if you are Pepperdine. So I think Texas is going to win against Baylor. However, I would not be surprised if Baylor was able to pull off the dub. If Florida was able to beat Kentucky in Gainesville, Baylor can beat Texas in Waco. It's definitely doable, but I just think Texas has just so much firepower, and they're just more consistent. Consistency is the name of the game when it comes to volleyball. So I don't want to bet against Baylor, but Texas just has so many offensive potential. They have so much offensive potential, and they also have defensive potential. And also, Texas has shown, even when they fall behind early in the match, even if they fall behind 2-0 or they fall in a 2-1 hole, they're able to show resolve and bounce back, as seen in their first matchup against Baylor and in the first matchup against Kansas State. Speaking of which, Baylor has added matches against Kansas State, which could be Kansas State's best chance at making the NCAA tournament, because Kansas State doesn't really have too many standout wins, but we'll see. I mean, I don't think Texas State's going to make the NCAA tournament, just because the NCAA tournament field is shrunken down to 48 teams. It's 30 automatic qualifiers and then 18 at-large spots. And considering how there's going to be like a war for like all 18 spots, it's going to be tough to pick some of these teams that look like they're good when it comes to making the NCAA tournament, but then another team is like up there, especially for like the non-Power 5 conference teams. Like some of the better non-Power 5 conference teams could be left out, such as like San Diego or... Well, I don't think San Diego will be left out, considering they've been ranked most of the season, but if San Diego doesn't play its cards right, then they could be on the outside looking in. And that's kind of the negative thing about all these, about having the... What's the word? Having a shortened tournament field. There you go. So there's that. Speaking of non-Power 5 conferences, this is a perfect segue to go into our first crucial preview in terms of conferences, and this comes from the Summit League, as the University of Missouri-Kansas City will be facing Denver, and this matchup will take place in Kansas City. So here's the thing about Kansas City. Kansas City is they're one win away from winning the Summit League regular season title and locking up the number 1 seed in the Summit League tournament. They're 13-1. They have won a whopping 11 straight matches, which has been absolutely surprising. Like, their most recent wins over South Dakota were really impressive because you won on the road, number 1, and number 2, South Dakota was chosen to win the conference. And in both matches, Kansas City actually had to rally back from a 2-1 deficit, as it's not impossible, but the fact that they won the 4th set and then they eventually won the 5th set is quite astounding. And again, winning on the road is so difficult, especially since South Dakota is allowing certain fans. They had, according to the stat sheet, the South Dakota-Kansas City first matchup had 584 fans, and then the second matchup, Kansas City-South Dakota had 622 fans in the second matchup. So, pretty good stuff right there. It just goes to show you that everything's starting to open up. As for Kansas City, they are led by Melanie Brecka, who has 248 kills on the season. Alex Ratzlaff has 143 kills. Odyssey Warren has 140 kills. And Dejanay Arnold has 121 kills. In terms of assists, Allie Shomers has 618 assists, while in terms of service aces, they are led by Ratzlaff, who has 24 service aces. She also had 8 service aces one time in a win over Omaha this year. In terms of digs, they are led by Maddie Wren, who has 265 digs, while Ratzlaff has 226. She can double as an outside hitter and defensive specialist and libero, which is absolutely amazing. Brecka has 147 digs, while Shomers has 132 digs, while Kennedy Schertenthal has 116 digs. In terms of blocks, now here's a little disclaimer. Kansas City's not the tallest team, as they have, I don't think they have one player that cracks 6. They only have like a few players that crack 6 feet, and I think their tallest player is 6'2". So anyway, back to the blocks. So Kansas City is led by Arnold, who has 54 blocks, while Ashia Dorsey, I think her name is Asia Dorsey, has 33 blocks, and then Allie Shomers has 27 blocks. As a team, Kansas City is only hitting 196, which kind of contributes to their height disadvantage, but they're holding their opponents to 168, which is impressive. And Kansas City's only loss to the season was a 5-set loss to Omaha, which, surprisingly, Kansas City led 2-0 in the match, and then Omaha forced a 5th set, and then Kansas City was up 14-12 in set 5, and then Omaha rattled off 4 straight points to beat Kansas City, which was very surprising. I thought Kansas City had that one locked up, but for a first-year team, Kansas City is really proving themselves well in the Summit League. As for Denver, now Denver has had the most, I think of all the teams in the Summit League, Denver has had the most uncertain season. part of the reason was because one of their matches got canceled, not because of COVID, but because of a snowstorm in Denver. And honestly, that was really a bummer. Their match against South Dakota, which probably is going to be crucial for South Dakota, or that's going to play into a big role for South Dakota, is really going to start to haunt them, as the snowstorm canceled Denver's matchup with South Dakota, and they're not going to make it up. So it is what it is. But one thing I will say about the Summit League is that there was not been one match postponed or canceled due to COVID, which is very impressive. I have to tip my hat to the Summit League, because I don't know if there's a whole lot of COVID cases in the Midwest, but I will say this: I'm glad that COVID is starting to wear down and it's starting to go away, because I don't like COVID, and I think COVID has been ruining everything. So there's that. Anyway, as for Denver, they are led by Lydia Bartolo, who has 116 kills. Lauren Poulter has 100 kills. Tina Bowe has 95 kills. Brianna Green and Erica Andrich each have 78 kills. And Ari Winters has 70 kills. Surprisingly, not a whole lot of kill leaders. I know they missed that one match against South Dakota, but compared to Kansas City's kill leaders, you would think there'd be 3 players in terms of reaching the century mark in terms of kills. As for assists, Denver runs a 6-2 offense, as Ellie Anderson has 280 assists, while Lauren Poulter has 184 assists. In terms of service aces, Bartolo has 27 aces. In terms of digs, they are led by Macy Carabine, who has 176 digs, while Bartolo has 123 digs, and Poulter has 86 digs. In terms of blocks, they are led by Brianna Green, who has 51 blocks altogether. Bowe has 50 blocks, and Poulter has 35 blocks. As a team, Denver surprisingly hits 264 while holding their opponents to 156. So this is the biggest test of Kansas City's season. This is the true question. Can they beat Denver? Now, here's the thing about Denver. Denver also has a chance to win the Summit League regular season conference championship. South Dakota, I don't think can win the... I don't think South Dakota can win the conference champion. Actually, no, they can. And here's how. If South Dakota has to hope that Denver wins out, and then South Dakota would be the conference champion. Actually, I don't think that's right. Actually, I don't know how South Dakota can win the conference championship, because South Dakota does not have the tiebreaker over over Kansas City, which, looking at the standings, and also South Dakota has to win out their matches as well. So I think if Denver wins this series outright, they're the conference champions, which that would be the biggest slap to the face if you're South Dakota. And then if Kansas City wins at least one match, they win the regular season conference championship outright as well. So the thing about Denver, so South Dakota cannot win the regular season conference championship unless, of course, Denver and South Dakota somehow make up that little matchup that was canceled, which at this point, it's not going to happen. The match is canceled, not postponed. So it's a bummer for South Dakota, considering they lost twice to Kansas City, but they led both matches 2-1, which, when you're at home and you're leading 2-1, you got to close the book on a hot team such as Kansas City. So I have no sympathy for South Dakota. I'm sorry, but I don't. Many will say I'm a hater, but it's the truth. But for Denver, I think Denver can give Kansas City a big-time matchup. Now, do I think they can win both matches? Of course they can. But can they win on the road? That remains to be seen, considering Kansas City is not lost at home this year. You know how the Kansas City Chiefs have had a lot of success at Arrowhead? that's kind of Kansas City when it comes to their home gymnasium. However, Denver has not lost on the road this season. Both of their losses have come in their confines of their own gymnasium. So this is going to be a battle of Denver being road warriors versus Kansas City being a great home team. My thing is, I think both teams split their matchups. I think Kansas City wins the first matchup, and then I think Denver's going to win the second matchup just to get some momentum going forward. And here's the thing about this matchup. I think no matter who wins or who loses this series, or who wins the regular season conference championship, I think Kansas City, Denver, and South Dakota, and Omaha are all capable of winning the Summit League Conference tournament. And for good reason as well. There are actually 9 teams in the conference, in the Summit League Conference, and I presume that Western Illinois and North Dakota, depending on who finishes last in the conference, will have to play a play-in game, unless, of course, they're going to basically have the first 8 teams and then the 9th team gets left out of the tournament altogether. It all depends. But like I said, Omaha, South Dakota, Denver, and Kansas City, in no particular order, can win the Summit League Conference tournament. I think those 4 teams are the most consistent teams. There's a reason why those 4 teams were selected to finish in the top 4. Although the positioning was rather awkward, as Kansas City was selected to finish 4th in the conference, Omaha was selected to finish 3rd, Denver was selected to finish 2nd, and South Dakota is selected to finish 1st. So those coaches' polls were dead wrong. But I think, in a nutshell, Kansas City and Denver split their matchups. I think Kansas City takes the first matchup because they're riding a lot of confidence, and then the second matchup, I think Denver grinds out one win over Kansas City. It's not what Kansas City fans want to hear, but I think Denver is just as good as Kansas City. It obviously sucks that they didn't get that second matchup against South Dakota, because that could have also made or break. That could have made or braked. Braked isn't a word, but it could have made or braked the chances of South Dakota winning the Summit League Conference regular season championship. Because if South Dakota had beaten Denver, and then Denver were to have beaten Kansas City twice this year, they would be tri-conference champions. So there's that right there. But that's not going to happen because Denver and South Dakota was canceled due to weather. So unfortunately, there's that. So now let's jump on over to the West Coast Conference, as we'll be seeing this noteworthy series this week. This will be between number 20 Pepperdine versus number 21 San Diego. So I'm not going to get into which players have which, because I think mostly everyone knows which players are standout players. For Pepperdine, they are led by Rachel Ahearns, who has 248 kills. Shannon Scully has 197 kills. Isabel Zelaya is their setter with 653 assists, while Ahearns leads the team in service aces with 22. In terms of digs, Madison Shields has 257 digs, leading the team in that category. And as a team, Pepperdine hits 264 while holding their opponents to 169. In terms of San Diego, they are hitting 255 on the season while holding their opponents to 180. San Diego is led by Roxy Wilbin, who has 208 kills. Grace Froling has 137 kills. Dana Fayette has 133 kills. And Katie Lukes, who gets honorable mention, has 61 kills. Katie Lukes actually started the season off in COVID protocol as she traced COVID-19, which was unfortunate for her, but it is what it is. In terms of assists, Laura Medill leads the team in assists with 385, while in terms of aces, Froling leads the team in that category with 18. In terms of digs, they are led by Wilbin, who has 142 digs, while Annie Benbow is second on the team in digs with 124. And in terms of blocks, they are led by Ellie Schrader, the freshman, who has 43 blocks as a whole. So here's the thing about Pepperdine and San Diego. Everyone was so high on San Diego going into this year, and I myself was included. But then Pepperdine decided to show up, and they crashed the BYU party. And I was thinking that San Diego's series between them and BYU was going to decide the West Coast Conference title. No. This could decide the West Coast Conference title, as there's actually one more week going to be added into Pepperdine's season, as Pepperdine will have the honor of facing Santa Clara at Santa Clara next Thursday and next Friday, which I'll probably preview that next week along. The same can be said for BYU, however. BYU is also going to play Santa Clara in Provo next Tuesday and next Wednesday, so Santa Clara is going to be very busy. Now they know how San Diego felt when they had to miss the first week against Gonzaga. As for Pepperdine and San Diego, Pepperdine is in a great position to win the West Coast Conference championship, as they pretty much need to win out. It's a simple concept. Win, and they're pretty much in. I want to say the tiebreaker is based on sets between the teams that are tied for first place, and if that's the case, then Pepperdine owns that category over BYU, considering they've won more sets over the Cougars. But Pepperdine is facing their greatest challenge of the season. They are facing a San Diego team which is loaded in terms of every position. The problem with San Diego is that now they've lost 3 straight, and they look so inconsistent. And here's why. The problem with San Diego is that their schedule was so structured poorly. Like, their schedule had they originally had Gonzaga as their first 2 matchups, then it went to St. Mary's as their first 2 matchups, then Portland, then they faced a Santa Clara team which was opening up its season. Then they faced Gonzaga and San Francisco, which were both opponents that San Diego didn't have too much trouble with. And then their schedule got tougher. San Diego's schedule got really tough. Their last 3 series of the season were at LMU, 1 match at home against BYU, 1 match on the road against BYU, and then their final series against Pepperdine. Now, the LMU series was rather interesting. The first match, San Diego looked dominant, and then I'm like, okay, this is not going to be a trap series. But then the second matchup, where San Diego blew a 10-3 lead in set 5, really made me wonder what the heck just happened with San Diego. And then last week, when San Diego lost to BYU, this really showed me that San Diego has had zero consistency, and they are just not performing well, and this is very concerning if you're San Diego. Like, San Diego now needs help, and they need to pretty much run the table this series. As for Pepperdine, they just need to win out, and then poof, they're conference champions, and they're going to be into the NCAA tournament. I can still see the Toreros making the NCAA tournament, but their chances are going to get slimmer if they don't pull out a victory this weekend. Here's the thing with Pepperdine. They've done a really good job when it comes to playing against teams that are pretty much under their level. I mean, against BYU, that was a close matchup, but I knew BYU was going to take at least 1 match against Pepperdine. And then against Baylor, that was pretty much going to be, you have to play perfect, which Pepperdine played good for the most part, but they didn't play perfect, so there's that. But now they're going to face a team that's pretty much on their level. San Diego and Pepperdine are pretty much borderline of the same level. The only difference is that Pepperdine actually has a win over BYU. Now, granted, BYU basically had to play both their matches in Malibu, while San Diego had to play 1 match in San Diego and then the second match in Provo. But I will also say this. I didn't think San Diego was going to be this inconsistent against BYU. Especially, it just goes to show you that if you lose 1 match along the way, that could pretty much be a momentum shifter. Because when you're up 7 late in set 5, you really ought to close the door. But when you're getting outscored 13-4, that is a cause of alarm. I don't know if San Diego is missing players, but according to their box scores, they're not. So, as for my little prediction, I think it's tough to pick between the team I was really high on going into this season and the team that has been a tremendous surprise this year. I knew Pepperdine was actually going to make noise this year. I just didn't think that they'd be in position to knocking off two perennial powerhouses in the Dub CC. So my thing is that it's so difficult to pick between San Diego and Pepperdine. I think Pepperdine can win both matchups. I'm sorry to San Diego, and I'll eat crow next week if I'm wrong, but I think Pepperdine has really come into their own. Pepperdine only has 2 seniors, but they have grown up really, really quickly, and I think Pepperdine has they're like the new dominant team. San Diego, to me, is going to have to prove that last week was just a complete and utter... last week was pretty much BYU just being better. And they're going to have to prove that not last week, but 2 weeks ago when they lost to LMU, that was just a complete fluke as well. So, and to me, when Pepperdine played LMU, despite it being a home series or a home game and a road game, Pepperdine really showed me that they can be consistent against a rival team. And now they're facing another rival team. And again, you can't really fault San Diego all that much, considering San Diego's schedule was structured to having their tougher matches in the latter of their schedule. But I will also say that I think that San Diego should have taken care of business against LMU. I get you're playing on the road, but LMU did not have any fans in their gymnasium, so I don't know. I got Pepperdine winning both their matchups, but I will be eating crow if the Toreros win at least one match this weekend, and it wouldn't surprise me if San Diego won a match this weekend. So now we're actually going to take it to the Ohio Valley Conference, aka the OVC, and we're going to go into this little matchup between Morehead State and Jacksonville State. Now, I have not talked about either of these teams as of right now, which I am embarrassed to say that, but I will also say this, I'm not really too big on those other conferences. I'm just fully interested in the Power 5 conference and maybe the West Coast Conference. Here's the thing about Jacksonville State and Morehead State. Both teams are unranked. They haven't really beaten anyone of noteworthiness. But here's the big thing about Morehead State and Jacksonville State. Both teams are undefeated. They're both 14-0, and this is their last match of the regular season, as next week they'll have the OVC tournament. Now, Morehead State is led by Olivia Lohmeyer, who has 204 kills, while Lauren Rocky has 136 kills, and Abby Holzman has 90 kills, and Mia Swearingen has 87. In terms of assists, Bridget Bessler has 545 assists. In terms of service aces, Taylor Hodges leads that category with 21. Allison Witten leads Morehead State in digs with 215. And as a team, Morehead State hits 270, but while holding their opponents to 123. So Morehead State has been consistent against their conference, but now they get a tough task against Jacksonville State, as Jacksonville State is led by Lena Kinderman, who has 197 kills. Courtney Glotzbach has 127 kills. Kaylee Milton has 113 kills, and Katie Montgomery has 103 kills. In terms of assists, Lexi Libbs is their setter, as she has 520 assists. In terms of aces, Montgomery leads the team in aces with 27, while in terms of digs, Erin Carmichael has 213 digs. And as a team, Jacksonville State hits 323 while holding their opponents to 159. So there's that in terms of statistics. So here's the thing about both of these teams. Whoever wins this series is the outright champion. But these two are going to be the 1 and 2 seed of the OVC tournament. Both these teams have surprisingly been consistent for the most part. Jacksonville State, however, has been a little bit more consistent as they've only dropped 4 sets all year long. One of which was to Southeast Missouri, the other was to SIUE, and then one was to Tennessee Tech, and the last one was to Belmont. Well, Morehead State lost a set to Eastern Illinois. They lost another set to Tennessee State. They had to go 5 sets with Tennessee Tech, and then they had to go 4 with Eastern Kentucky. So, as a whole, Morehead State has lost a grand total of 5 sets all year long. So, it's kind of tough to speculate this matchup, but looking at numbers, I definitely say Jacksonville dominates in the category, especially offensively. Like, Jacksonville State offensively looks dominant, while defensively, it looks like defensively Morehead State has the defensive category on lock for the most part, as they have more digs. That could also be the case of they've had to play more sets, but it also could be the case of their teams have been very dominant, as their opponent's hitting percentages kind of showed for it, and then Jacksonville State has had a high offensive hitting percentage while holding their opponents to a pretty low amount in terms of hitting percentage, but yeah. So honestly, it's tough to pick who will come out on top, but I think Jacksonville State takes both matches. Looking at statistics and looking at their match, comparing matches by matches, I think Jacksonville State has more consistency than Morehead State. It's not a knock on Morehead State, but I think Jacksonville State just looks like they're going to have an easier time. And Adam Karnick one time mentioned this. It's not a matter of if you win, it's how you win. Because wins are wins. That's the 2 most important letters when it comes to the alphabet when it comes to sports. W and L. And you could obviously get the W, but how you get the W in volleyball depends on if you can show if you're truly up there. So there's that. All right, now let's jump to the Big Ten. Now we're going to jump into the Power 5 conferences. So we're going to jump into this Power 5 matchup in the Big Ten. This is going to be between Ohio State and Purdue. Oh, by the way, that little matchup between Morehead State and Jacksonville State, that's going to actually be at Morehead State. So there's that right there. So good stuff right there. Now let's jump over to the Ohio State Purdue women's volleyball series. So this matchup will take place in Ohio State. It's going to be played in Corvallis, so that's something you also need to note. Now, Ohio State is actually undefeated at home, while Purdue hasn't really had the best track record away, but it's not bad. Ohio State, I've already pretty much always talked about Ohio State. Purdue, I've also talked about, as Caitlin Newton is their kill leader, while Emily Landot is Ohio State's kill leader. And we all know that Kylie Murr is a beast at libero, while Jenna Otek is a beast at libero for Purdue. So here's my thing, short and sweet. This is going to be an intense series between Ohio State and Purdue. I really think that the Boilermakers need to win this series, at least one match, to prove that they can at least lock up a number 16 seed, or a top 16 seed. Like, Ohio State has really proven themselves this year. They haven't lost at home. Their only loss was to a 5-set match against Nebraska, which they led to nothing, but you never want to get comfortable against a Nebraska team, no matter who is at the helm and who that team has. Ohio State looked impressive in their win over Michigan, while Purdue also looked impressive against Rutgers. But like I said for Ohio State, now their schedule starts to get tougher. They obviously did a good job of escaping the trap series that was against Michigan, but now they face another challenge. Purdue is just as young as Ohio State is. They only have 2 seniors, but they have a mixed bag in terms of underclassmen. Same can be said for Ohio State, though. To me, I think this is going to boil down to defense, and I think Ohio State has that. However, I also want to say that this is going to boil down to overall experience, and it's also going to boil down to which team has had the better experience in terms of being battle tested. And I think that category right there gets dominated by Purdue, considering Purdue is really been. They don't have the number of wins that Ohio State has, as Purdue is 11-5, while Ohio State is 15-1. But Purdue has had to face a lot of stiff competition. They had to face Wisconsin, lost both matchups. They had to face Minnesota, lost both matchups. And then they split the series against Penn State, which was pretty noteworthy, because when you're beating Penn State at Penn State, that's when you are doing good things. But this is Purdue's chance to actually prove themselves. I'm going to say that both teams split the series. I think Ohio State is definitely been a very good, consistent home team, but they face yet another challenge in Purdue. And for those that saw the series against Nebraska, the Huskers really let them know that who's one of the teams that truly runs the Big Ten and who pays rent. Obviously, the true team that runs the Big Ten is Wisconsin, which no one's going to beat unless something weird happens. But I will also say this: if Ohio State wants to lock up a top 5 seed, they're going to need to pull out the victory, both victories against Purdue. That would pretty much solidify their top 5. Or not top 5, top 10 worthiness in terms of getting a top 10 seed in the NCAA tournament. I mean, I could also see Ohio State being a top 5 seed, but that's a bit of a stretch, considering they have a loss to Nebraska. They haven't played Minnesota. We don't know if they're going to make up their series against Minnesota. They were able to make up their series against Penn State, so it should be doable to make up their series against Minnesota. That is going to be also another true test for the Buckeyes. But I have Purdue and Ohio State splitting their series. I also want to quickly make note of the ACC series between Louisville and Georgia Tech. So my thing I'm just going to go rapid fire with the Louisville-Georgia Tech series. Honestly, I don't believe that Georgia Tech's going to beat Louisville. I think Louisville is way too good for Georgia Tech, and I think Louisville is going to pretty much dominate that series. Or dominate that matchup. That matchup is going to be that little matchup right there. I believe it's going to be at whatchamacallit. It's going to be in Louisville, which shouldn't be too big of a hassle for the Cardinals. Like, the problem with Georgia Tech is that they don't have a true standout victory, which I don't know, man. Like, I don't think after seeing Georgia Tech's loss to Pitt last week, then I don't think that Georgia Tech can beat Louisville. I just don't really think they have what it takes. It's sad for me to say that, just because Georgia Tech does have a solid team with Kylie DeBerg and Mariana Brambilla, but I also need to say this, that ever since that loss to ever since the loss to Pitt, where Pitt just straight up dominated them, I thought that was truly evident that that team is not that it's cracked up to be. So there's that, and it's going to be in Louisville. So yeah, Louisville will be the home team. Georgia Tech will be away. I think Louisville wins the matchup, and I think that's going to really boost their chances of winning the ACC. Georgia Tech is in first place theoretically, while Louisville is at 9-2. But that would give Louisville a leg up on Georgia Tech, as that would benefit them, as that would give them the tiebreaker, as well as that would make Louisville's job a little bit more easier going forward, just because I did see that Louisville has a very favorable schedule, and Louisville really proved themselves last weekend against Florida State. They beat Florida State in 4 sets, and Florida State was one of the hotter teams, as they had won 9 in a row, which I was very impressed by Florida State, but I was also impressed that Louisville was able to cool them off, especially at home. So I think this is a big series for both teams, and if Georgia Tech wins, then this puts Georgia Tech a few steps closer to locking up the ACC title, but a Louisville win gets them closer to the ACC title as well. You also can't sleep on Pitt, which has an outside chance of winning the ACC, considering they've lost 4 matchups. But they're not doing that bad. Also got to make note of North Carolina, which is 9-3, but North Carolina has a very tough schedule ahead of them. I think they also have to make up some matches, because I think a few of their matches got postponed due to COVID and whatnot, and that's something that, and all of North Carolina's matches are going to be precious, considering if they want to win the ACC and lock up an automatic qualifier to the NCAA tournament, they're going to need to pull out all the stops. As North Carolina, something else to note is that North Carolina does play North Carolina plays Florida State at Pitt, or in Pittsburgh on Saturday, and then they also play Pitt on Sunday, and then same can be said and then on Friday, Florida State plays Pitt, which could also make or break the chances of North Carolina and Florida State and Pitt. So the ACC is really starting to heat up, and I am all for it. So the teams that still have a shot at winning the ACC is Georgia Tech, Louisville, Notre Dame, North Carolina, and Pitt. Miami is pretty much out of the running, unless, of course, they get a lot of help, but they still have to catch some certain teams, and they don't even have the tiebreaker over teams like Notre Dame or Louisville and whatnot. So you have to factor that in as well. So the 5 teams that I just previously mentioned that are actually currently ranked in the top 25, the AVCA top 25, are the ones that are basically up there. So there's that. So that's that for the ACC. The final matchup I want to quickly go over is Utah and Washington State. This is going to be a matchup of the young Washington State Cougars taking on the desperate for a decently good statement win Utah Utes. So Washington State actually had their series against Washington canceled due to a COVID outbreak within I believe it was within their own program. So now they're able to. So this week they actually have the green light to face Utah. So the matchup will be at Utah, and it'll be on Friday and Saturday. Here's the thing about Utah. Like I said, Utah has been iffy. Like, sometimes they have nights where they look really good, and then they have nights where they're like, why is this team in the top 15 again? And as for Washington State, they have a young team. They have 1 senior this year, and also they've had a lot of their matches canceled due to COVID within other teams in this program. Like, their series against USC canceled because of a 2-week COVID absence for the Trojans. Their series against Stanford canceled because Stanford did not have enough scholarship players. Washington State does have 2 losses on the season, only 2 losses. One to UCLA at home, and then they also lost to Oregon at home as well. So theoretically, Washington State is undefeated away. But I will also say this, I think Utah has a lot more senior experience, and while I have been bashing Utah throughout most of this episode, I'll also say this, I think Utah can bounce back and get the dub over Washington State. My thing for Washington State is that they're just too young. They're a year or 2 away. They have a lot of freshmen on their team, and only one senior really hurts this team going forward. Just because in a conference such as the Pac-12, you really gotta play strong. But this team with only one junior, a redshirt junior, and one senior is really going to struggle. Like in the upcoming years, Washington State is going to be great going forward because you have a lot of talented players like Pia Timmer, just to name one. But I will say this, Washington State, it wouldn't shock me if Washington State actually got a win over Utah. But I just think playing on the road and then the altitude is really high, and then I think Utah's allowing fans in its stands, and you're basically a young team that's basically that's under pressure and having to attempt to lock up the Pac-12 title or get closer to the Pac-12 title. It's just going to be tough for the Cougars. But if they do happen to win both of their matchups against Utah, they'll get Arizona next week, and that should be a doable and winnable series for the Cougars. But we'll have to see. So it all depends on if the Cougars can emerge victorious. If they can get at least one win, I think Washington State will be fine. Washington State, it was unfortunate for the Cougars that they had unfortunately a COVID. I think they had one positive COVID case, which was eventually a false positive. But it's better to be safe than sorry. So there's that right there for Washington State. But I could see Washington State still in the NCAA tournament. How far they will go depends on if their underclassmen can step up, which is going to be tough. But that's going to do it for all my previews of all the matchups, and that's going to do it for this episode of Set Point. I know we are nearing the 2-hour mark, and I know we have another show coming on in less than 10 minutes. So thank you all for tuning in. I greatly appreciate it. And in less than 10 minutes, we have the Kansas City Shuffle with Dave Friedman and Ryan P. Davis. So definitely tune in for that. They'll also talk a little about Kansas City's women's volleyball team, hopefully, against Denver. So we'll see. And definitely do tune in because Dave and Ryan do an amazing job with their show, and they're funny. They're really funny, and they'll turn your frowns upside down. So there's that. But without any further delay, it is time to drop the beat, because I'm about to dip like a banana in chocolate. You feel me? Thank you all for tuning in to today's episode of Set Point. If you were listening live, I definitely appreciate it. If you're listening on the replay, I also appreciate it. It really means a lot that you're taking time out of your day to tune in. I don't know when Set Point will be back next week. I don't know if it'll be back next Monday at 5 p.m. Pacific Time, 8 p.m. Eastern, or if Set Point will be back next Tuesday at 2 p.m. Pacific Time, 5 p.m. Eastern. It all depends on what my schedule looks like and what everything goes accordingly when it comes to my own schedule and whatnot. So we'll see. But for everyone here at IE Sports Radio, this is Teran Rodriguez signing off. Have yourself an amazing rest of the day. Enjoy your March Madness. Enjoy all the volleyball matchups that are happening. And I will see you on Friday for the SoCal Supreme Sports Show. Have a great night, everybody.